After his wife's death, rancher Eli's twin daughters stopped eating, speaking, and sleeping. No nanny lasted more than a week until Clara arrived. She carried secrets of her own, and a truth that might finally set the family free. The girl was 8 years old and hadn't spoken a word in 42 days. Her sister, same age, because they'd been born just minutes apart, had stopped eating on day 29. And now both lay curled in the corner of the nursery, pale as moonlight, their knees pulled to their chests, eyes wide and glassy as porcelain. They didn't cry, didn't fuss, didn't move unless touched, just breathed barely and blinked now and again like the world around them wasn't one they wanted to stay in. Clara saw all this in the first 5 seconds after stepping into the room. She didn't speak either, not yet. She knelt slowly, placing the toy horse she'd carved herself onto the braided rug, letting it settle in the sunlight before them. No movement, not even a twitch, just silence. Downstairs, Eli Kerrigan waited, boots planted wide, hat clenched in his hand, face drawn like leather left too long in the sun. He said few words when she arrived, hired her with a glance, said nothing about the other 3 nannies who'd come and gone in under 6 weeks, and not a single word about his wife, how she died or what remained of her in this big, silent house. But Clara knew grief, and she knew silence wasn't empty. It was full of the things people couldn't bear to say. The girls' names were Grace and Willa. They wore matching dresses, stiff and high-collared. Their hair had been brushed, someone cared but not styled. No ribbons, no childish color, just order, cleanliness, control. Clara didn't try to coax them that first day. She simply sat near the wall, reading aloud from a book she'd chosen not for children, but for heartache. A worn old copy of The Secret Garden, which her mother had once read to her when she was sick with fever, when her own world had shrunk to whispers and white walls. She read slowly, letting the rhythm do the work. Her voice low, not sing-song, not pleading, just steady. A sound that didn't demand anything. The twins didn't look at her, but neither did they move away. That night Clara stood on the back porch, watching the moon rise over the distant ridge, arms crossed against the chill. Eli stood beside her. He hadn't asked how it went. He didn't have to. "Do you know what happened?" she asked finally. His jaw worked, teeth grinding softly. "Their mother died." Clara waited. Nothing more came. "She was 28, she said quietly. "That's young." He nodded once. "You buried her here." Again the nod. Clara didn't push, just let the silence swell between them until it settled. "Good night, Mr. Kerrigan," she said and turned to go. He spoke just as her hand touched the door. "Don't go into her room." Clara paused. "Their mother S." He didn't answer. But she understood. The next morning, Willa watched Clara through slitted eyes, not full of suspicion, but something closer to study. Grace didn't move at all, her face pale and taut as parchment. Clara left breakfast on a tray, the same as yesterday. It would go untouched like all the others. By day 4, she changed the routine. No more coaxing, no more trays. She set a single peach on the windowsill and let the breeze do the rest. By day 6, Willa touched it, sniffed it, bit once then left it half-eaten. Progress. Eli said nothing, but Clara noticed the way his shoulders relaxed when she entered the room, the way he looked at her with questions he didn't know how to ask. And still she hadn't entered the closed room at the end of the hall. She'd passed it a dozen times. Its door was always shut, its knob polished clean as though someone still turned it regularly. Some nights she swore she heard soft music playing behind it, a lullaby maybe, or grief itself. On day 9, Grace spoke. She said one word, "Mama." Whispered it barely audible. Clara didn't react, didn't startle or cry or break the spell. She only nodded and kept reading. That night Eli met her on the porch again. He had a bottle in one hand, 2 tin cups in the other. "She spoke," Clara said softly. He didn't reply, just poured 2 fingers of whiskey into each cup and held one out. I think she's waiting, Clara said. Grace, for the truth, whatever it is. Eli swallowed hard. She was pregnant, he said after a long pause. Lost the baby, got sick after, never came back from it. Clara waited. He didn't explain further. I think Grace knows more than you think, Clara said, and Willa's following her lead. Eli looked at the stars. There's more, he said, but I can't. She didn't press, she only said, they're not eating, not really, not sleeping either. Something's weighing on them. He nodded, same thing that's weighing on me. She looked at him then, really looked, and saw what others missed. Eli Kerrigan wasn't grieving his wife's death. He was grieving something buried with her. Day 12, Willa spoke. She said, where did Mama go? This time Clara did cry, not because of the question but because of the voice, so small, so scared. She went somewhere she thought was peaceful, Clara answered, somewhere she thought would stop the hurting. Grace looked up, eyes sharp. Did she leave because of us? Clara didn't lie. No, she whispered, but I think she was trying to spare you from something she couldn't fight anymore. Willa trembled. Grace held her. Was she sad? Grace asked. Yes, Clara said, but she also loved you so much she tried to hide it. That night both girls ate soup without being told. Clara sat by their bedside, humming the tune she'd heard behind the closed door, and this time they let her tuck the blankets around them. Downstairs, Eli watched from the shadows of the stairwell. Tears lined his cheeks. He didn't know how she knew the tune, how she hummed it the way his wife once had when the babies were too fussy to sleep. But he knew now. He had brought Clara here for a reason he couldn't name. She had cracked something open. And whatever came next would either save them all or bury more than one truth. On the 13th day, the sky turned gray over the Kerrigan ranch, not with storm clouds, but with that strange, heavy stillness that seems to announce a shift before anyone can name it. Willa spoke first that morning, not just one word, but a sentence. Clara, can you brush my hair? She said it from the corner of the room, voice brittle as moth wings but firm. Clara didn't smile. She just nodded, walked to the dresser, picked up the bone-handled brush, and sat behind the girl like it was the most ordinary request in the world. Grace watched silently, but her knees weren't pulled to her chest that morning. She sat with her legs folded, spine straight, eyes clear. Clara's hands were slow, gentle. She didn't speak as she brushed. Willa didn't either. But in the stillness between them, something passed, an invisible bridge, a thread of trust that had taken root quietly and now held strong. Downstairs, the kitchen ticked with its usual quiet rhythm. The kettle whistled, the stove crackled, but the house was not the same. The silence had changed color. It wasn't the aching, empty kind anymore. It was the kind that hummed with possibility. Eli hadn't been to town in nearly 2 weeks. The men at the feed store whispered about it. The saloon girls rolled their eyes and said the widower was finally cracking. But Clara knew better. He stayed because the girls had started reaching for her hand. Because one of them had asked for a story last night, not from a book, but a real story, a memory. Clara had told them about when she was little and caught her toe on a root while running barefoot, how her mama had patched it with whiskey and thread, how it left a scar shaped like a crescent moon. Willa had smiled, just barely, but it was a smile. Still, Clara knew the danger of soft beginnings. They could slip away if truth wasn't allowed to stretch its legs. So that afternoon, she went to the locked door. She hadn't meant to. Her feet took her before her mind caught up. She stood before it a long time. The knob was cool beneath her hand. There was no keyhole, no creaking hinges, just a door and whatever waited beyond it. She turned the knob. The room was preserved, not as a shrine exactly, but close. The bed was neatly made, though the pillow bore a faint indentation. A hairbrush lay on the vanity. The mirror was clean. A book with a ribbon bookmark rested on the nightstand, open to page 219. A scarf still hung on the chair, And the smell, lavender and cedar and something else, something human and gone. Clara didn't step far, just enough to take it in, to see the letter. It was tucked beneath the edge of the mirror, folded clean, corners neat, written in long, looping script, no name on the front, but Clara knew who it was meant for. She took it without touching anything else and closed the door behind her. That evening, while Eli was tending to the fence line, she waited on the porch, the letter in her apron pocket. The sun was bleeding red over the western ridge, and a wind had picked up, tugging at the hem of her skirt. He saw her before she saw him, slowed his walk. Something in her stillness told him everything. "You went in," he said. "I did." He looked at the horizon instead of her. "You read it?" "Not yet." He nodded, came up the steps, took off his hat. "I don't want to hurt you," she said. "But if that letter holds the reason your girls stopped speaking, if it holds the reason you can't meet their eyes, then you can't keep hiding from it." He didn't answer. She handed it to him. He didn't open it. Instead, he held it between calloused fingers and whispered, "She wrote it the night before." Clara's throat went tight. "I didn't know she was gonna do it," he said. "She didn't leave signs, not ones I understood. She smiled that day, laughed even, played the piano, told me to take the girls riding, said she wanted the house to herself for a few hours. I thought she was getting better." He looked at the letter like it might explode. "She bled too much after the baby. The one we lost got weak, but it wasn't just her body that broke, something else, something I couldn't fix. And I kept telling her to get strong, for the girls, for me. I think I pushed her right off the edge." Clara stepped forward. "No, she made a choice, but you didn't hand her the knife." His eyes filled. "She used a bottle of laudanum, locked the door, left that letter propped against the mirror right where I'd see it. And the girls, they found her first," he whispered. "They were looking for her scarf. They went in together. I was in the barn." Clara's hand flew to her mouth. "Oh, God." "They were just standing there when I came in, still as statues. Willa was holding her hand. Grace kept saying she wouldn't wake up. I wrapped her up, told the girls she was sleeping, carried them out. Didn't tell nobody for hours. Couldn't." He sat on the step, crushed beneath the memory. "I never told them the truth," he said. "I just kept saying she was gone." "And they've been trying to figure out what they did wrong ever since," Clara whispered. Eli nodded, tears slipping down his cheeks. Clara sat beside him, didn't offer comfort, only presence, which sometimes is the only thing grief respects. The next morning she gathered the girls in the nursery. Willa had eaten half an apple. Grace had slept the night through. "There's something I want to tell you," Clara said. They looked up. She spoke softly, clearly. "Your mama didn't leave because of you. She left because her heart was hurting in a way no one could see. She tried to stay. She tried so hard, but in the end it felt too big for her." Grace trembled. "She loved you," Clara said. "I read her letter. It said she loved you more than the whole world, but she couldn't stay." Willa's voice was barely audible. "Did she go to heaven?" "Yes," Clara said. "And I believe she watches you now. And I believe she needs you to live, not disappear." That night, Grace asked to sleep in her mother's room. Eli stood in the hallway, hand gripping the doorframe, then nodded. Clara changed the sheets, opened the window, let the wind carry some of the sadness away. The girls curled on the bed, side by side, and Clara read aloud from the book left on the nightstand. Eli watched from the doorway. The wind whispered through the pines, and for the first time in many weeks, the Kerrigan house did not ache with silence. It pulsed with something else. The first small, fragile heartbeat of healing. Morning came with a hush that seemed to settle over the Kerrigan ranch like snow that hadn't yet fallen. Eli stood by the barn door with a saddle slung over one shoulder, watching the sky lighten by degrees. He hadn't slept much. Sleep didn't come easy anymore. not with the weight of that letter still folded inside the breast pocket of his coat. He hadn't read it, not properly, couldn't bear to, but he hadn't thrown it away either, and that, in itself, was something new. Inside, the girls were already awake. Clara found them curled on either end of their mother's bed, hair tousled, eyes wide but calm. They didn't ask questions that morning, didn't speak of death or heaven or laudanum or loss. But when Clara reached for the hairbrush and sat near the foot of the bed, both girls moved toward her without needing to be called. By the time the sun had lifted over the hills, breakfast was already on the table: oats and dried apples and a jar of honey Clara had found tucked behind the flour bin. She let the girls sweeten their own bowls. Willa used too much, Grace not enough. Clara didn't correct either. The silence between them had changed again. It had grown soft at the edges. Eli didn't come inside for breakfast. Clara saw him from the window, saddling his bay mare, the one with the scarred flank. He moved like a man unsure of his own direction, a little slower than usual, as if his body and mind hadn't yet agreed to the day. When she stepped out onto the porch, he didn't look up right away. "You going to town?" she asked. He nodded. "Need feed." Clara waited. "Was you be gone long?" "Back before dark." "You should take Willa," Clara said gently. "Or Grace, just one, a short ride." Eli's hand paused on the cinch strap. "Don't think they're ready." "I think they're waiting for you to be." He didn't respond, but she saw the flicker of doubt pass across his brow like a shadow on water. He adjusted the stirrup length and said nothing more. Inside, Clara prepared a basket for the girls: bread and cold chicken, a sliver of cheese, and 2 hard-boiled eggs. When she brought it into the front room, Grace was seated near the fire, drawing something in the corner of a book page with a charred stick of wood. Willa sat beside her, legs swinging. Clara knelt between them. "Your papa's going to town." The girls looked up, twin flashes of wariness in their gaze. Clara reached out and tucked a lock of hair behind Grace's ear. "I think it'd be good for him if one of you rode along." They didn't speak, but Willa's fingers tightened on her skirt. Clara saw it and smiled gently. "He misses you both," she whispered, "even if he doesn't know how to say it." Grace looked toward the window where Eli mounted his horse in the weak morning light. She stood slowly. "I'll go." Eli didn't hide his surprise when she stepped outside, coat bundled around her, boots too big. He looked at Clara over her shoulder, but Clara said nothing, just nodded. He helped Grace mount, adjusting the stirrup with more care than necessary, his big hands gentle at her waist. They rode off without fanfare, the wind tugging at Grace's scarf. Clara watched until they vanished down the path, then turned back to Willa, who had pressed her face to the glass. "They'll be back before supper," she said softly. Willa nodded, but Clara saw the tightness in her jaw. They spent the day cleaning the kitchen, real cleaning, not just sweeping and wiping. Willa scrubbed the floor with a rag, tongue between her teeth in concentration. Clara worked beside her, humming now and then, sharing stories without needing them to be answered. By early afternoon, the sky had begun to cloud. Not dark, not storm-heavy, just the kind of soft gray that made the air taste like cold iron. Clara set a pot of beans to simmer and peeled potatoes, setting Willa to mashing them with butter and salt. When Eli and Grace returned just before dusk, something in them had changed. Grace carried a small bundle wrapped in a square of blue cloth. Her cheeks were pink from wind, her eyes steadier. "She wanted to stop at the cemetery," Eli said, barely above a whisper. Clara's heart twisted. "I didn't take her close, just let her look. She left a ribbon on the gate." Grace said nothing, but she stepped close to Clara and placed the bundle in her hand. Inside was a single candy stick, a brass button, and a pressed violet. "She wanted you to have it," Eli said. Clara didn't ask why. She just knelt, kissed Grace's forehead, and whispered, "Thank you." That night they all sat together at the supper table. No one said much, but Willa passed the salt without being asked, and Grace broke a piece of bread in half to share with her sister. After supper, Eli lingered by the hearth, hands in his pockets. The girls played quietly with blocks on the rug, constructing a lopsided barn. Clara cleared dishes in the kitchen, aware of the way he watched them, as if trying to memorize the rhythm of peace before it slipped away again. Later, once the girls were asleep and the wind had picked up outside, Eli stepped onto the porch, hands trembling as he unfolded the letter. Clara joined him, silent. He read it aloud. It wasn't long, just a page. His wife had written in the margins, little loops and flourishes like she was speaking directly to him through paper. She spoke of the baby, of the fear that had swallowed her whole, of the exhaustion that never eased, and finally of love, the kind that wounded as much as it healed. She said she knew I'd do better without her, he whispered. Said she wasn't strong enough to be what we needed. She was wrong, Clara said gently, but grief doesn't listen to truth, only to pain. Eli's voice cracked. She asked me not to hate her. You don't, Clara said. No, he whispered, I never could. They stood in silence after that, the wind curling around them like a veil. The next morning, Grace and Willa were already in the kitchen when Clara came down. Willa was cracking eggs. Grace was measuring flour. Neither looked up. Clara set the kettle on the stove and smiled. Breakfast or storm preparation, she teased. Both, Grace said. Papa said we might ride to the pond later, if the weather holds. Willa added, he said we could take the small poles, try for perch. Clara's breath caught. That sounds like a good plan. The day held steady until just after noon. Then, from the ridge came hoofbeats. Not Eli's. Not a neighbor's either. Clara stepped out, eyes narrowing. A rider crested the hill, long coat flapping. He carried a satchel slung across his back and a rifle strapped to the saddle. His face was shadowed, but something in his bearing made Clara step back inside and reach for the girls. Stay here, she said, voice calm but firm. She met the rider halfway to the porch. He dismounted slowly, eyes sharp. Kerrigan here. Who's asking? The man's smile was slow and wrong. Family. Clara's blood chilled. You'd be the new help then, he asked. I'm Clara. Nice name, I'm Judd. He took a step closer, and she smelled whiskey under his coat. Eli ain't been writing, he said. That ain't like him. I suppose grief changes people. Judd's eyes gleamed. That it does. Behind her she heard Willa whisper something. Grace shushed her. What do you want? Clara asked. To collect what's mine. And what's that? He grinned. Land, debt, family things. Clara stood her ground. This isn't a good time. It never is, Judd said, stepping onto the porch. But timing's not always polite. And just like that, peace snapped like a brittle twig. Judd Kerrigan's boots hit the porch boards with the sound of someone who wasn't used to being turned away. He moved like a man who'd been welcomed places he shouldn't have been, whose smile had opened too many doors. Clara felt it before he even reached the threshold, that subtle shift in the air that comes when someone dangerous pretends they're just passing through. She didn't move. She kept herself planted in the doorway like a post, blocking his way inside. I told you, it's not a good time. Judd's gaze flicked past her toward the faint sound of Grace's footsteps in the kitchen. Sure looks like folks are home. Clara stepped forward, forcing him back a fraction. If you've got something to say to Eli, you can wait till he returns. Till then, you can tie your horse to the post and keep your boots on the ground. Judd's smile cracked wider. Well, aren't you a little field general? You always this charming. Clara didn't blink. I've got coffee on the stove and a shotgun by the door. You can take one, not both. He held her stare for a long beat. Then, surprisingly, he laughed, a rough, sour sound that didn't reach his eyes. Hell, Eli always did like the stubborn ones. You knew his wife. I knew her well enough, Judd said, leaning lazily against the porch beam. Pretty girl, quiet, too quiet. Should have married someone who talked less and drank more like me. Clara's fingers curled around the edge of the doorframe, steadying herself. You didn't answer my question. Why are you here? Family, he said again. That house, that land, the pasture and the barn. That's Kerrigan blood, same as mine. Eli got it when our old man passed, sure, but I never signed no paper saying I was out of the running. You think he owes you the land? Clara asked. Judd shrugged. Maybe, or maybe just a piece. Or maybe just a place to put my boots up and drink from the well for a while. Who knows? Point is, I'm here now. That counts for something. Clara stared him down. It counts for trouble. Before he could answer, another voice came from behind them, low, calm, and sharp as a whip crack. Step off my porch, Judd. Eli stood at the gate, one hand resting on the pommel of his saddle, the other by his side. The wind tugged at his coat. He looked tired, dust-lined, but unflinching. Judd straightened up, grinning like a dog who'd been caught stealing but didn't care. Well, there's the prodigal son. You're not family, Eli said evenly. Not to me, not to this place. Judd clucked his tongue. Come now, that's no way to greet your brother. Half-brother, Eli corrected, from your daddy's second mistake. That wiped the smile clean off Judd's face. Funny, that mistake standing right here, breathing the same air, claiming the same dirt. You've got a knack for showing up when things are soft, Eli said, stepping onto the porch. But not when work needs doing, not when things fall apart. I brought whiskey when your wife died, Judd said, voice lowering. You brought a bottle and stayed for 3 days trying to paw at the widow next door, Eli said. Don't rewrite history. Judd's eyes darkened. And now you've got yourself a replacement, I see. He nodded toward Clara. Real quick work even for you. Clara didn't flinch, but she saw Eli's jaw tighten. You're not welcome here, Eli said. You never were. Maybe not, Judd said. But this place, it's too much for one man and 2 broken girls. You're gonna drown in it. Might as well let me help myself before it swallows you whole. Eli stepped forward, eyes hard. If I ever see you on this land again, I won't ask twice. Judd studied him. You'd pull iron on your own blood. Eli's voice dropped. I buried my wife with my own hands. Don't test how far I'll go to protect what's left. A long silence stretched. Then Judd snorted, backed off the porch, and mounted up. Well, he said, tipping his hat toward Clara with mock courtesy, you're prettier than the last woman who turned me down. He rode off slow, deliberately, like a man daring someone to shoot him in the back. Clara let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. He'll be back. Eli nodded. I know. Do the girls know who he is? No, Eli said quietly, and I'd rather keep it that way. That evening the house was quieter than usual. Even the wind outside had died down, as if the whole valley was listening. Grace asked no questions. Willa didn't mention the man on the horse, but both girls stayed close to Clara, following her from room to room like shadows. Clara didn't press, but she kept a rifle propped by the door. 2 days passed without incident. Judd didn't return. The air turned colder. Frost curled along the edges of the windows in the morning. Clara caught herself watching the ridge every time the dogs barked, heart jumping before she could talk it down. Then came the letter. No envelope, just folded once, sealed with dirt smudges and scrawled in crude block letters. You can't hide them forever. Clara found it nailed to the gate post. Eli read it once and burned it in the stove without a word. But that night he stayed up by the fire cleaning his rifle. The girls didn't notice. They were too busy stringing beads and yarn, a necklace for a doll Clara had made out of old pillow stuffing and cotton scraps. But Clara noticed. He didn't sleep at all. The next morning, Clara found him sitting on the porch with a blanket wrapped around his shoulders, and the sky still dark. He's not just here for land, she said softly. No. He wants them. Eli's voice was flat. He's always hated me. He'll use whatever he can to hurt what I've got left. Clara sat beside him. We could leave. He shook his head. Then he wins. But if he keeps coming, I'll handle him. She studied his face, saw the wear in it, the sleepless days stacking behind his eyes. You don't have to carry it alone. He looked at her finally, really looked. That's the thing. I've been carrying it alone so long I forgot how to let go. Clara reached over and touched his hand. Then start with me. He didn't pull away. That afternoon, Eli took the girls riding, just for an hour, just to the creek. Clara stayed behind, baking cornbread, boiling water, keeping her hands busy. The calm didn't last. A gunshot echoed through the valley. Not one. Two. She dropped the bowl, bolted for the door. Out in the pasture, the horses were still calm. No smoke, no hoofbeats, no shouting, but her heart beat too fast, too loud. She grabbed the rifle and ran toward the trees. She found them near the creek. No one was hurt. The shots had come from the other side of the valley, distant, warning shots. Eli had taken the girls off their horses, crouched low, bodies tucked behind a rock outcrop. When Clara arrived, he looked up. He's circling, making noise, trying to scare us. Is it working? She asked. He looked at the girls, both wide-eyed, pale. Yes, he said, but not in the way he thinks. That night the decision was made. The girls wouldn't sleep in their own room. They all dragged blankets and quilts into the parlor, made a nest near the hearth, and kept the fire burning till dawn. Eli sat by the window with his rifle across his lap. Clara kept a pot of coffee on the stove, hot and ready. The girls, huddled between them, whispered until they fell asleep. And still Judd didn't come. But they all knew the knock was coming. It was just a matter of time. They didn't sleep much the next night either, not from noise or threat, but from the kind of silence that screams. The valley was too still, the sky too low, the kind of quiet that makes you realize something is waiting out there, just beyond the edge of the world you thought you knew. Clara dozed in a chair, rifle across her lap, boots still on. Eli leaned against the window frame as if sleep might be tricked into visiting if he stayed upright. The girls lay curled between them, exhausted but restless, as though even in dreams they knew someone was watching the house too long. Judd didn't show, but every hour he didn't made his presence louder. By morning, Eli stepped out before sunrise, scanned the ridge with a glass, and returned with mud on his boots and a look Clara hadn't seen before. Someone's been at the east fence, he said. Fresh horse sign. The wire was loosened, not cut, just enough to rattle a man. She didn't answer. She just went to the stove and stoked the fire hotter, poured coffee into 2 cups and set one down for him without a word. Grace and Willa came in quiet, eyes flicking between the two of them. Clara forced a smile, smoothed their hair, said it was time for breakfast, but her voice had too much cheer in it, too practiced. Grace noticed. She always did. The routine turned strange after that. Eli worked the outer perimeter more often, riding the fence line with a rifle across his saddle. Clara taught the girls how to pack a bag fast. In case we go on a trip, she told them, but they weren't that young anymore. Grace folded her blanket with careful hands. Willa packed her doll with the cracked button eyes into the satchel and asked nothing. Then, just past noon 3 days after Judd had ridden off, a letter arrived again. This one wasn't nailed. It was tucked between the slats of the front porch, folded twice. Clara found it when she stepped outside to shake out the rugs. The handwriting wasn't just crude this time. It was angry. The ink scratched deep like the pen had been a knife. You took what was mine. I'll come for her like I should have back then. Watch your door. There was no name. But Clara didn't need one. She brought it inside. Eli read it in silence. Then he folded it once, tucked it in the wood stove like the first, and watched the fire eat it slowly. This time he said nothing at all. By late afternoon the wind had shifted. The hills to the north darkened first, then the sky behind them. Storms moved fast in these parts, no warning, no mercy. But Clara knew this was more than weather. "You think he'll come tonight?" she asked as she tied down the shutters, her voice barely louder than the rising wind. "He'll wait for the storm," Eli said, checking the rifles, setting one at each door, a pistol beside the hearth. "That way, if things go wrong, no one hears a thing." The girls slept in the pantry that night, pillows and quilts piled behind sacks of flour and jars of pickled beets. Eli and Clara made it feel like an adventure. "Storm shelter," they said, "just in case." Grace climbed in without protest. Willa held Clara's hand a little too long before letting go. The thunder broke just past midnight. The first knock came 20 minutes later. It wasn't loud, it wasn't frantic. It was polite, 3 slow taps evenly spaced like someone asking for tea. Clara was closest. She stepped toward the door, rifle already raised, heart hammering against her ribs like it wanted out. Eli shook his head. "Not yet," he mouthed. Another knock, slower this time, heavier. Then a voice, rasping just outside the door. "You always were the quiet kind, Eli." He didn't answer. "You always took things didn't belong to you, first the ranch, then the name, then the woman." Clara stiffened. "You remember her, don't you?" Judd called. "Jane, sweet little Jane. You think she married you 'cause she loved you. You think she stayed 'cause she had no better offers. You don't know a damn thing, Eli. She begged me to take her away." Still Eli said nothing. His jaw was stone. "She cried for you, sure, but she bled for me." Clara didn't understand what that meant at first. Then she did. Her stomach turned. "She lost a baby once," Judd called. "Everyone said it was yours. That was a lie. She never told you, did she?" The silence in the room was unbearable. "She came to me once," Judd went on, "after you were married. Said she couldn't stand the quiet in that house. Said your eyes looked through her like glass. She needed noise, fire, me. You think the girls are yours, better get a blood test, brother." Eli moved so fast Clara almost didn't see it. He swung the door open, rifle aimed straight at Judd's chest. But Judd was already 5 paces back, arms out, smiling like a man who knew exactly which bones to break with just his tongue. "That's more like it," he said. "You're done talking," Eli growled. "No," Judd said. "Not yet. You don't get to bury her memory in that quiet little hearth, not while I'm still breathing. You made your point, now get off my land." "I'll go," Judd said, "but you'll never forget what I told you. Every time you look at those girls, every time they smile like her, you'll wonder." Eli didn't move, didn't blink. Judd took one slow step backward. "You think you've kept them safe, but the truth is, you've lied to them every day of their lives." Then he turned, mounted his horse, and vanished into the trees. No shots fired. No fight. Just poison left behind like rot in a wound. Inside, Eli slammed the door and braced it with the chair. Clara didn't speak. She saw the way his hands shook as he set the rifle down, saw the way he leaned on the back of it like his legs might give. "I don't know if it's true," he said finally. "You don't have to," Clara whispered. "I need to," he said. "I need to know if I'm holding another man's children every day, if everything I built was a lie." "They're not his," Clara said firmly. He looked at her. "They're yours, Eli. You raised them, you held them when they cried. You gave them your silence, your strength, your name. I don't care what blood says. They're yours." His eyes welled, just for a second, just enough. In the pantry, Willa whimpered in her sleep. Eli turned his head, wiped his face, and went to her. Opened the door, crawled inside the little nest of blankets, and pulled both girls close, his arms shaking but steady. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. Clara watched from the doorway, something breaking open in her chest. Later, when the storm had finally passed, she stepped outside and saw the sun pushing through clouds like a promise. The ground was still wet, the air sharp, but it was over, for now. She found Judd's tracks near the gate, muddy, deep, but heading away. Still, something in her gut told her he wasn't finished. Not yet. And she wasn't sure how many more knocks this family could take. By morning, the world had quieted again, but it was the kind of quiet that made your skin prickle. The kind that came not with peace but with pause, a breath held too long, waiting to become a scream. The sky was gray, low, unsettled. Clouds like bruises rolled across the ridge, and the last of the frost clung to the fence posts like it was afraid to let go. Inside, the Kerrigan house bore its weight in silence. Eli didn't say much. He hadn't since the night Judd's words split the floor beneath them. He went about chores like a man underwater, hands steady, eyes empty. He fed the horses, chopped the wood, checked the lines, but he wasn't there. Not really. Not in the way Grace looked for. Not in the way Willa reached for. They felt it. Children always do. Clara felt it too. She tried to fill the space with something warmer, games in the kitchen, soup that simmered all day, little notes she slipped into the girls' satchels when they played pretend travel. But warmth only goes so far when the man in the house has built a wall around himself. That afternoon, Eli stood in the barn longer than usual, just staring at a broken wagon wheel like it held answers. Clara watched from the porch. Then she stepped off the boards, crossed the yard, and joined him in the half-light of the loft. He didn't look up. "I think you should talk to them," she said softly. His jaw tensed. "About what?" "You know. They're children. They're your children." His silence stretched like wire pulled too tight. "She doesn't even look like him," Clara continued. "Neither of them do. You're letting a broken man rewrite your memories." Eli finally looked at her. "But what if he's right?" "He is." "But what if he is?" he asked again, this time quieter. "What if I've been looking at someone else's daughters all these years and calling them mine?" Clara stepped closer. "Then you've done a better job loving them than he ever could have dreamed of doing." He looked down. "Do you remember," she continued, "last winter when Grace fell on the ice and cracked her arm? You didn't sleep for 2 nights. You boiled cloths, made her soup, read to her from that tattered old copy of Black Beauty. You held her hand every hour." He didn't speak. "And Willa," Clara went on, "she wouldn't sleep without that bear. What was his name?" "Thistle," Eli said, the word cracking his throat. "You stayed up sewing the ear back on by firelight, with your thick fingers and your bad eyes." He gave a dry laugh, almost ashamed. "They are yours," Clara whispered, "and they love you. That's the only truth that matters now." Eli rubbed his face, bone tired. "Then I better start acting like it." He left the barn with a new weight on his shoulders. Not lighter, never lighter, but better placed. Balanced, maybe. He found the girls in the field near the edge of the pasture where the grass grew taller, picking dandelions like the world hadn't cracked beneath their feet. Grace saw him first. Willa looked up after. He walked slowly, as if afraid they'd run. But they didn't. He knelt beside them in the field, boots in the dirt, hat in his hands. "I need to tell you something," he said. Grace tilted her head. "Is it about the man?" Willa's hand slipped into his, small and sure. "Yes," Eli said, "and about your mother and about me." They listened. He told them the truth, not all of it, not the cruelest parts, but enough. Enough that Grace's eyes widened and Willa pressed her face into his coat. He told them that their mother had been complicated, and that grief sometimes rewrote stories. That Judd was angry and wrong and not welcome. "Did she love you?" Grace asked softly. Eli blinked back something sharp. "I think so," he said, "in her way, but that's not the point." "What is?" "I love you," he said. No matter what any man says, no matter what any blood test might show. Grace nodded slowly. We know. It was Willa who whispered the next words. You're our papa. And just like that, the knot that had been choking him for days loosened. Not undone, not gone, but looser, like something that might one day be released completely. They went back to the house hand in hand. That night, for the first time in weeks, Clara saw Eli smile. Really smile. It didn't last long, but it was real. The quiet didn't last either. 3 days later, the barn burned. It started just after midnight. No storm, no lightning. Just flames, leaping high, orange tongues licking at the black sky like hell had come to visit. Clara smelled the smoke first. She was already running before the scream came, Eli's voice cutting through the dark like a whip. The fire took fast. Hay, oil, dry beams. Judd had known exactly where to strike. Eli and Clara fought it together, buckets and blankets, beating at the blaze till their arms screamed. But it was gone before dawn. Ashes, black and wet. The horses had been out in the pasture. No lives lost, but the barn was finished. Grace stood on the porch, shivering in her nightgown, Willa clinging to her. Eli's hands were blistered. His eyes burned, not just from smoke. He was here, Clara said. Eli didn't answer. He's not just threatening anymore. I know. He wants something. He wants to destroy it all. Then we can't wait. Eli looked at her. We end it, Clara said, tonight before he takes more. You think he'll come again that soon? He's escalating. He'll come when he thinks we're weakest. Eli nodded once. Then let's give him what he wants. They made a plan. That afternoon, Eli rode into town. Not for supplies, for a name. Someone he hadn't spoken to in years, an old friend turned sheriff, a man with debts to settle and no love for Judd Kerrigan. Clara stayed behind with the girls, fortifying the house. She moved oil lamps to higher windows, dragged the wood box inside, nailed shut the barn doors so the fire couldn't be used again. She showed the girls how to crawl under the bed, how to be silent when the dark came close. By sunset, Eli returned with 2 rifles, a box of cartridges and a telegram. The sheriff was coming at dawn. Think we'll still be standing? Clara asked as she loaded shells. Eli looked toward the hills. We'll be here, one way or another. And sure enough, just as the moon climbed into the sky, the dogs began to bark. Low, warning, not panic, just awareness. Judd was near. Clara stood at the window watching the road. She saw the glint of moonlight on metal first, a saddle buckle, then the slow silhouette of a rider, Judd, alone this time, or so it seemed. He didn't call out. He didn't knock. He just stepped down from his horse and waited. Eli opened the door but didn't step outside. You came. Figured you, do you want to see my face? Judd said. I've seen it enough. I'm not here to talk, Judd said, lifting the hem of his coat just enough to reveal the handle of a pistol. I'm here to finish it. Eli didn't flinch, then try. But Judd didn't move forward, he waited. Clara saw it then, 2 more riders slipping from the trees. One held a torch, the other something worse, rope. Clara grabbed the second rifle, ran to the porch. Back off, she shouted. Judd turned slowly. You're still here. She's family, Eli said. Family, Judd mocked. What a joke, you always collect strays, brother. Only the ones worth saving. Judd's eyes narrowed. You don't get to keep everything. You never earned any of it. Silence, then movement. Judd reached. Eli fired first. The shot cracked the valley wide open. Judd stumbled back, blood blooming dark against his coat. His men scattered. Clara fired 2, not at them but into the air, warning shots sharp and wild. The horses spooked. One rider fell. The other turned tail and vanished into the brush. Judd hit the dirt hard, groaning, crawling toward the porch. Eli stood over him, rifle steady. "Should have stayed gone," he said. Judd coughed, spat blood. "Should have been me." "You never knew what to do with love," Eli said. "You only knew how to burn it." Then finally, the torchlight behind them turned into real light. Lanterns from the sheriff's men, thundering down the trail, too late for the shot, but just in time for the reckoning. They found Judd bleeding out beside the porch. Eli stepped aside. Clara did lower the rifle till they cuffed him. The sheriff tipped his hat. About damn time. Inside, the girls hadn't moved. Clara found them under the bed, hands clasped. "It's over," she whispered. "He won't hurt you again." They crawled out slowly, blinking into the light. Grace hugged her around the waist. Willa held on tighter. And when Eli came in, they ran to him too. Because no matter what Judd had said, no matter the blood or the lies, this was their father. And he had fought for them. Judd Carrigan didn't die. That might have been easier for everyone involved. But life has a way of dragging some men out of hell just long enough to let them rot in it. The bullet tore through his side clean, just below the ribs, missing anything vital but plenty to remind him he'd been beat. The sheriff's men loaded him onto a stretcher and took him down the ridge at first light, wagon wheels crunching over the frostbitten trail like they were carrying away more than just a broken man. Maybe they were. Eli didn't watch him go. He stood at the edge of the porch, arms crossed, shoulders tight. Clara brought him coffee, and for a long while neither of them said a word. The cabin stood half-shadowed in the dawn, barn gone to ash, fences half-mended, the front gate still swinging loose from the ride in. But inside the girls were safe. Inside there was warmth. "What now?" Clara asked after a while. Eli sipped the coffee, eyes still on the horizon. "I don't know." He meant it. Because when a storm like Judd finally passes, the silence afterward isn't peace, it's unfamiliar. He'd spent years preparing for the man to return, built his whole life around the next knock, the next letter, the next fire. Now there was only the sound of the wind and the birds returning, and that was almost harder to bear. Clara understood. She didn't push, just sat beside him and let the quiet stretch. Eventually the girls came out too, Grace with a book in hand, Willa carrying her patched-up bear, Thistle. They sat on the porch together, legs swinging off the edge, the four of them in a row like pieces that didn't match but fit anyway. That was the first real morning. The one where they all breathed differently. But healing doesn't arrive like sunrise. It comes slow, ugly, with setbacks. The next day, Willa wouldn't eat. Clara coaxed her with toast and honey, but the little girl pushed it away. That night she cried in her sleep. "He's coming back," she mumbled, twisting under the quilt. "He's coming back." Clara held her till she quieted. The day after that, Grace snapped at Eli when he asked her to help carry wood. "Why should I?" she barked. "You're not really my." She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't have to. Eli just nodded, lips pressed into a line, and went outside alone. That evening, Clara found him sitting behind the barn's burned remains, staring at the blackened earth. "They're scared," she said gently. "Scared people lash out." "I know. They don't mean it. I know that too. But it still hurts," she added. Eli didn't answer right away. Then he said, "She said I wasn't really their father." "She didn't mean it." "I know." He threw a stone into the ashes, watched it vanish. "I thought when Judd was gone it would all go back to normal," he said, "but I don't even remember what that means anymore." Clara sat beside him. "Then maybe it's time we stop trying to go back." He looked at her. "We build forward," she said. "New routines, new meals, new memories." He shook his head slowly. "I don't know how." "I do," she said. She took his hand. And the next day, they started again. It began with breakfast, real breakfast. Pancakes, eggs, even bacon borrowed from the last tin in the smokehouse. Clara made the girls help. Grace stirred. Willa set the table. Eli lit the fire and stood back like a guest in his own home. Then they went into town. It had been months since Eli rode into Salt Creek with both girls in tow. Heads turned, people stared, but no one said a thing. Except one old woman on the porch of the general store who called out, "Ain't seen those girls smile in a while. 'Bout time." Grace flushed, Willa grinned. They bought flour, soap, needles. Eli let the girls each choose a penny candy from the jar by the counter. Willa picked licorice. Grace picked lemon drops. Clara noticed Eli paid with coins so worn the shine was long gone. Then came the schoolhouse. Miss Henry met them at the door, spectacles low on her nose. "We've been holding their seats," she said. "Figured this family would find its feet." Grace returned to her desk the next morning. Willa clutched Clara's skirt like she might bolt, but eventually slid into her little bench beside the stove and unpacked her new pencil with fingers that trembled only slightly. And Eli went back to rebuilding. Not just fences. The barn took longer. Friends from town came to help, hammering, sawing, lifting beams into place beneath spring skies. Clara watched Eli smile more often, watched the girls run through the pasture again, watched joy begin to slip its roots back into the soil. But healing, like spring, always brings one last frost. It came in a letter. Mid-May, delivered by hand from the sheriff himself. Clara opened it on the porch while Eli sharpened tools nearby. Her face went still. "What is it?" he asked. She handed him the page. Prisoner Judd Carrigan escaped custody during transfer to county facility. One deputy wounded, one horse stolen. Believed to be heading west. Approach with caution. Eli said nothing. He read it again, then again. The girls were just inside, singing while they braided thread into their doll's hair. Clara waited for the fear to return. But it didn't. Not in the same way. Eli folded the letter and handed it back. "Let him come," he said. She blinked. "What?" "I said let him come," he repeated. "If he wants to try again, he'll find something different here." "What's that?" "A family that knows how to fight." And he was right. Because by now Clara had memorized every creek in the valley, every shadow that didn't belong. Eli had reforged the lock on the cellar door, rebuilt the barn to withstand fire and snow. Grace kept a blade tucked into her boot, and Willa had learned to whistle loud enough to bring every neighbor dog for miles. Judd was still out there. But the fear wasn't what it used to be. That night Clara tucked the girls in as usual, kissed their foreheads, wished them dreams full of warmth and cake and summer fields. Then she stepped out to the porch where Eli stood, watching the trees. She slipped her hand into his. "You think he'll come again?" she asked. "Maybe," he said, "but this time he won't find a broken house." He turned to her. "He'll find a home." She leaned her head against his shoulder. "You're not the only one who raised them, you know." "I know. They're ours, Eli." He nodded. "I know that too." The wind was gentle that night. No knocks came. Just the quiet sounds of a house holding steady, of two children breathing soft and safe behind thick walls, and of two people who had chosen, against everything, to stay. Summer arrived like a balm, softening the sharp edges of a spring that had tried so hard to tear the Carrigans apart. Wildflowers climbed up the fences. The barn stood proud again, its new timbers catching golden light as if they'd always been there. The garden Clara had planted in patches now bloomed into rows. Tomatoes, potatoes, peas curling around sticks. Life was stubborn. It always was, and so were they. Grace helped harvest beans in the morning, climbing barefoot along the raised beds, while Willa carried a pail of eggs in from the chicken coop. Their laughter had a new sound to it now, unburdened, still guarded at times but real. On certain evenings, Clara would stand in the doorway and listen, a towel in one hand, a dish forgotten in the other. just listening, just letting it wash over her. Eli had begun to whistle again, not often, not loud, but sometimes when he repaired a fence post or fixed the porch steps, a few low notes would escape him, and Clara would catch it from the corner of her ear. He didn't know he did it. That made it sweeter. They didn't speak of Judd much. He became a shadow in memory, not in presence. Rumors drifted in now and then, of sightings in counties far west, of a robbery gone wrong near the Colorado border, of a man limping from town to town with a scar and a temper. But he never returned. Maybe he knew better, or maybe, Clara sometimes thought, he didn't want to face what this family had become without him. Late July brought heat thick enough to curl the hair at Clara's nape. She took to tying it up with an old ribbon Willa had found and claimed was magic. The girls ran wild through the grass most days, returning only when supper cooled. Clara taught them how to sew doll clothes, and Eli showed Grace how to fish properly. None of that wild, splashing nonsense. Then one afternoon, Clara found Willa beneath the sycamore, staring at something in her lap. She was quiet, even when Clara approached. "What have you got there?" Clara asked. Willa looked up. "It's a drawing," she said, lifting it carefully. It was a child's sketch, charcoal on paper, but the image was unmistakable. 4 figures. A tall man, a woman with a ribbon in her hair, and 2 girls holding hands. "That us?" Clara asked gently. Willa nodded. Clara knelt beside her. "Why do I have a ribbon?" "Because that means you're happy." Clara blinked. Willa added, "Papa said you do know when you're happy until you're quiet long enough to hear it." Clara smiled through a sting of tears. "He said that, did he?" Willa nodded solemnly. That night Clara showed the drawing to Eli. He studied it for a long time. "Think we should frame it?" she asked. Eli looked at her. "Think we should live it?" They did. They lived it for weeks, then months. The routine settled into something easy. School returned in the fall. Grace's handwriting sharpened, her letters filled with questions for the future. Willa took to drawing everything she saw, trees, birds, once a very detailed sketch of Eli asleep in the rocking chair with his mouth wide open. Clara started baking again. Real baking. Bread with crusts that cracked just right, pies that smelled like memory. The kitchen became her sanctuary, the girls her helpers, Eli her greatest taste tester. But as the first chill of winter returned, bringing with it the kind of wind that made you lean a little harder into those you loved, Clara noticed something. Eli was coughing. At first she thought it was dust, then maybe smoke from the stove, but it deepened, grew harsh. One night she woke to hear him in the next room, bent double, trying not to wake the girls. When she rose and touched his shoulder, he waved her off. "Old lungs," he muttered, "nothing more." But by late November he was slower, his steps more labored, the laughter less frequent. One morning he fell on the porch trying to chop wood. Clara ran to him, heart pounding, but he just lay there for a moment, eyes on the sky. "I never noticed," he said softly, "how blue it gets before snow." Clara knelt beside him. "You need a doctor. I need you to stop worrying." But he agreed, reluctantly, to ride into town. The doctor was kind but grim. The news came in soft, clipped words, something in the lungs, something deep. "Could be months," he said, "could be less. Hard to say with the way he's built." Eli didn't flinch. Clara did. "I want to go home," he said afterward. And he did. He built one last birdhouse with Willa, reread Black Beauty with Grace, sat by the fire with Clara and told her every story he hadn't dared share before, not because he feared death, but because he knew what love looked like now, and he wasn't going to leave with anything unsaid. In early December, snow returned, and with it the silence of endings. Eli Kerrigan passed in his sleep, wrapped in quilts, with Clara holding one hand and both girls curled against the other. The fire still crackled. The wind still moved gently across the windows, and he left with the same quiet grace he'd given to every hard year of his life. Clara didn't cry right away. She rose slowly, kissed his forehead, whispered, "I'll carry them now." And she did. The funeral was small. The valley turned up. No one said much. No one needed to. The girls placed a birdhouse at his grave, painted with flowers and ribbon. Clara stayed behind after everyone left, sitting in the snow till her dress hem froze, telling him everything she still held inside. Then she rose. Took the girls home. The years that followed weren't easy, but they were full. Grace grew tall, fierce, bright. Willa softer, a dreamer, always with charcoal on her hands. Clara never remarried, not because she didn't have offers, but because her heart had settled. And every time someone asked her how she did it, how she raised two girls that weren't hers, survived fire, violence, grief, she just said, "Because someone taught me what a real family was, and once you learn that, you never forget." She kept his chair by the fire, kept the ribbon Willa gave her. And in the quietest moments just before dawn, when the house was still and the world not quite awake, she'd hear it. The low sound of whistling, soft and steady, carried through the wind like memory. A reminder. He was always there, just where they'd left him.